Welcome to the Zen of Reffing Roller Derby, Lesson 25, No Pack Situations. I'm Axis of Stevel, the author of the training manual. I'm filming this on June 20th, 2018. The content of this presentation is up to date as of this recording. Should this video become outdated or replaced by a newer version, I'll put a link on the screen to where you can find more information. As always, you can find the latest version of the full training manual at www.tinyurl.com/zenreffing. A quick disclaimer. The WFTDA, MRDA, and JRDA are not responsible for the content of the training manual or this presentation, nor do they make any claims as to the accuracy of their content. Another note. If you spot any errors or outdated information in this presentation, put a comment on YouTube explaining the issue and listing the time code. Let's talk about failure to reform. Failure to reform is an action whereby a skater does not attempt to reform a pack during a no-pack situation. It could be the skater just standing there doing nothing, or it could be the skater taking an action which is doing something other than failing to, other than reforming the pack. As always, we will take safety above other things. I'm not going to require a skater trample a down skater just to reform the pack. But apart from that, when there's a no-pack situation, a blocker needs to reform the pack. Now, something to keep in mind here is failure to reform specifically refers to blockers. I often will just interchangeably use the word skaters. I mean blockers. Jammers are never part of the pack. A jammer cannot reform the pack. There is an extraordinarily obscure situation, I'm not going to go into it, in which a jammer can get a failure to reform scenario, but it's quite controversial, frankly more hypothetical than real, and I'm not going to confuse this. So what I want to talk about here is, how does failure to reform work? Well, some basic concepts you need to understand. First, when you have a no-pack situation, like this one, I want the skaters to reform the pack immediately. Immediately means at the first legal opportunity. So, leisurely reforming, this person slowly moving up, or even, and I don't mean like lollygagging, they don't have to be doing that, but just sort of like, this is the failure reform, and they just, take a step or two and then just sort of coast. Or this person, rushes forward for 4 steps, but then turns around to start bracing, one of their other skaters because the jammer is coming in. No, that is not sufficient. I want to see them zooming forward. I want to see them very actively and aggressively trying to get that pack reformed. No half-ass measures, in this one. Now, another concept. If the pack immediately reforms, we're like, no pack, the person takes a step back, there's no penalty. It's just, yes, we had a no-pack situation, but since there was no impact on the game during the no-pack situation, it just reformed really fast. We're not going to issue a penalty to anybody. I sometimes refer to failure to reform as the gambler's penalty, and here's why. Suppose you've got this situation. It's a no-pack, goes up, and the rear group deliberately decides they're not going to do anything. They're just going to stand right there. Well, they don't have to, because somebody in the front group might take a step back and reform the pack for them, and because it is so fast, there's not enough impact from the no-pack situation that I'm not going to issue a penalty. So they can gamble. A skater can intentionally break the rule, hoping that somebody else is going to rescue them. That somebody else could be someone on their team. Maybe the pivot wants to stand there, and they're hoping that yellow 3 will move up. Maybe they're hoping purple 2 will go back. Doesn't matter. So they can gamble, but they're going to lose that gamble sometimes. And we're going to watch some videos in a little bit, and you're going to see some people that are going to engaging in actions other than aggressively, and I don't mean aggressive mean like blocking. I mean aggressive like very actively trying to reform the pack. And you're going to watch some skaters getting penalties for that. Another thing, a skater who has committed a penalty cannot reform the pack. So, purple 2 is holding here, purple 2 suddenly rushes forward, destroys the pack. If purple 2 steps back, as I'm calling out the penalty, they have not reformed the pack. So when they rush forward, I'm going to basically say no pack to get this group sort of moving up, and then I'm going to try to spit out real quick, purple 2, destruction, and get purple 2, so everybody else knows that purple 2 doesn't have it. But, in the meantime, as they're moving up, I'm not going to reform the pack using purple 2. Now, this particular case isn't going to matter much because purple 2 is right next to the others. But we could also set a case where these 3 are way up here, say they're stopping yellow jammer or something like that, and purple 2 goes, ooh, I want to help, and races forward to go help. and then I call the destruction penalty, but as I'm calling the penalty, purple 2 is kind of hanging out here, and they're moving up, and such. Again, purple 2 cannot reform the pack because they have committed that penalty. Next, how do people actually reform the pack? Well, when we've got a no-pack situation, there we go. The rear group must move forward. The front group must cease all forward movement. Now, this is where I'm going to divvy it up into initial and sustained failure to reform. Initial is this. When I yell no pack, I want to see just a quick token effort from the teams. I just want to see they're showing me something. For the front group, that is ceasing all their forward momentum. That's ceasing their strides, basically, that they begin at least coasting. For the rear group, I want to see they at least take a single step. That shows, because oftentimes a single step will just reform the pack. But I want to see that they're at least making a token effort to do this. If the token effort is not successful in reforming the pack, and like I said, it often is, then I'm going to elevate the standards here. And I'm going to say, okay, now at this point, I want the rear group to actively heavily increase their speed until they reform that pack. I'm going to want the front group to not just coast, but brake. And the reason being is this. Suppose the pack is going at pretty high speed, and just suddenly, the rear group just suddenly hits the brakes. So I give a destroying the pack penalty to someone. They go off. But these people are going high speed. These people are stopped. If they just coast until they come to a stop, they may not stop until they get to here. Meanwhile, I've got these people that have to speed up and follow them all the way over, and they're not going to catch them up, until they get over here or wherever. So we're going to have a long way of a lot of impact here on the game that they're got to do half a lap before they can kind of catch up with each other. I don't want to see that. I want to see the pack reforming quickly. So yeah, that token effort, stop striding. Token effort, take at least a step. If that's not sufficient, now I want these people to be actively braking till they come to a stop, and these people to be speeding up heavily. Now, mind you, if they're sprinting, obviously I don't want them to back block them. I will allow them to slow down so they can enter in a controlled and safe fashion as they reform the pack. But it would not be sufficient if yellow 1 over here kind of went forward and then stopped. Yeah, they made the initial thing, but then they didn't continue, or they took one step and then they just tried to coast up until it reformed. That would not be sufficient. Something here, the front group does not need to skate clockwise. As I said in the lesson when we talk about failing to return would be the one case, or when you've got an out-of-play blocker in front of the pack and the pack is stopped or moving clockwise, then that out-of-play blocker would have to move clockwise. That is the only case in the game of roller derby where somebody has to move clockwise. So same thing here. Well, or not the same thing at all, really, because they don't have to move. So all they have to do is come to a stop, and then they can hold, and if the back group doesn't come to them, they just insist they're standing there. I'm going to issue the first penalty. If they stand there, I'm going to issue another penalty. If they stand there, I'm going to issue the third penalty. Eventually, I'm just going to issue this person so many penalties, the game fouls out, and at that point, I'll probably call off the jam just because the game is breaking down at that point. These people do not have to go clockwise. That is not their responsibility. It may strategically be in their interest to do so. They may choose to do so. They will very often choose to do so. They do not have to. So think of it as I want to see zero forward momentum. So if they're going clockwise, well, that's negative forward momentum. That's fine. That's better than zero, but I certainly am not going to require it. Skaters in the middle group, if they have one, can either, well, it's going to kind of depend on the middle group. Let me show you a middle group here. Let me move the jammers out of the way here. Okay, now we've got a middle group. Okay, for the purpose of this, because all four of these are from the same team, I'm just going to consider this, instead of having a front, middle, and rear, I'm going to consider this just one giant front group that's spread apart. So in that case, I want them all to come to a stop. In the case of something like this, where now the middle group, if they go forward, they reform the pack. If they stop, then these people move forward. That will reform the pack. Now I'm going to give them a choice. They can either move forward or they can stand still, and they need not all choose the same action. This person can go forward. This person can stop as they move up. And that's fine, because now we're down to 2 groups, and now this group must move forward. So again, like if you wind up with a group in the middle which is mixed, then I will let them pick whether they're moving up or back. Basically, whatever will reform the pack. Another thing, suppose we've got an out-of-bounds blocker that could reform the pack. Oh, we have a no-pack situation over here. Matter of fact, I'm even going to put this right here. This out-of-bounds, I'm going to put this person in the box. Yellow 3, if they re-enter the pack, that if they re-enter the track, that reforms the pack. So I require them to do that. Yellow 3 may not stay out of bounds. Similarly, if yellow 3 is down, we have no pack, I'm not going to let them just sit there and stay down. They got to stand up. Obviously, safety reasons apply. If somebody's about to trample on top of them, I don't expect them to get up. But if they can legally get up, safely get up, yes, I expect them to do so. Because if they don't, they are intentionally delaying the reformation of the pack. That is failing to reform. Now, there is an exception to this. The exception is this. Suppose we've got a pack. Purple 2 blocks yellow 3 forward and out of bounds. Yellow 3 can't enter the track because now they're cutting. So yellow 3, again, because we do not require people to skate clockwise. So in this particular case, I'm going to require this middle group has to move up. Because as soon as let me move these people out of the way here. As soon as they move up, now yellow 3 can enter the pack. So basically, if you're preventing an opposing skater from re-entering the track, you have to move up until that skater can re-enter. Now, one little lesson I want to say about re-entering skaters. Suppose this person is skating back from the penalty box and they're going like this, or I don't know, or like this. I don't require that they instantly enter the track, because this person entering the track does not reform the pack. They are so far distant that it's going to make no difference whatsoever. So I'm okay with letting them come around and then re-enter behind everybody. Now, if they get to like here, now I want them re-entering over here and potentially reforming the pack. So, or there, potentially reforming the pack like that. That's what I would want. What else we got here? Let's see. Oh, yes. So who gets the penalty for failure to reform? Let's start with something simple. Okay. We have a no-pack situation. We're a group. They're not going to move. It goes to the most responsible skater. When you can't tell who that person is, then it goes to the closest skater, to the referee making the call. And these calls almost always will come from the IPRs. So the rear IPR is going to issue, if all 4 of them stood there, it's going to issue it to yellow 3. They take the penalty. If they continue standing there, yellow 2. Continue standing there, yellow 1. And so because that was the order in which they were most responsible. Now let's say it looked like this, and all 4 of them choose to just stand there. Well, now the most responsible is yellow 3, because yellow 3 is in front. They are the closest one to reforming the pack with the front group. So if they all move together at the same speed, the pack would reform because yellow 3 reached there. So yellow 3 is most responsible, so they will take the penalty first if they stand there. Yellow 2 will take it next, etc. Now we'll also, we're going to shake this up a little bit here, because we're going to add into, suppose this group had a blocker here, and these 2 are actively preventing the blocker from getting through, and they're still continuing to engage. Now, I don't mean that they have to get out of the way of the blocker. It's fine if they're in the way of the blocker. Jammer. If I got a jammer here, it's fine if they're in the way of the jammer. Jammer can go around them. What is not fine, jammer tries to go around them, and they move to get in the jammer's way. What's not fine is, this person, physically initiates a block of some sort. Or this person is like leaning in their way and getting in there, sticking their butt in their way. They're actively trying to prevent them physically or positionally from getting through. That's basically continuing a block or initiating a new block in there. Now the person who's most responsible is the person who's having the most impact. And that would become, let's say, pivot here. If pivot was doing that, I'm going to issue the penalty. If both of these people are equally doing it, then the rear IPR will issue the penalty to the closest one, because this is the person who's having the most impact right now. Because this jammer can't get through because no one will reform and because they're blocking. So I'm going to take that one off first. Then if they all stand there, the next one takes it. Now the jammer starts to go through. Now yellow 2 takes it next because yellow 2 is refusing to move up, and so on and so forth. The front group works much the same way. Again, they have to come to a stop. So suppose they don't. Suppose they decide they're going to continue striding forward. Well, then I'm going to give it to the most responsible skater. And if they're all equal, that's going to be the closest. If one is lagging behind and they're all moving up, then I'm going to issue it first to yellow 1. Then, since they're all the same, the closest, and pivot, then 2, then 3, like that sort of thing. Now, oftentimes, what you're going to find is you get a combination of reactions. So, no pack, and yellow 2 takes 1 step, yellow 1 takes a bunch of steps, yellow 3 kind of, looks around and is not sure, and then they go a little delayed, and maybe the pivot is continuing to block. So, in this particular case, pivot is the most responsible. They're continuing to block. They would take a penalty first. But yellow 2, otherwise, consider this. The initial failure to reform, we had 2 people that were initially failing to form, because yellow 1, as I said, took a bunch of steps. Yellow 2 took a single step. Both of those made their initial. Yellow 3 was looking around confused, but is not blocking. Pivot blocked. So pivot has the most impact, and they took that penalty first. But now we're past the initial. Now we're up to sustained. They all have to be moving forward. So at this point, as I said, yellow 3 had been a little confused, and then before they'd started forward. So these 2 are moving forward. Yellow 2 is not. Yellow 2 is going to take the penalty at that point, because these 2 are doing what they needed to be doing, which is moving. May have taken them a little bit to start, but they did. So oftentimes you can have multiple skaters engaged in failing to reform, but the penalty is going to only go to the person who's causing the most impact from it. Essentially, they're taking the fall for the other people. Now, a team can try to use that to their advantage sometimes, some sort of strategic way. That's up to them to decide. I'm just going to keep issuing the penalty to the most responsible. I want that pack to reform because it's having a big impact on the game. One other thing, another type of impact you can have is, let's say, this person knocked the jammer out of bounds. Yellow 2 did. And this person's moving up, this one's moving up, this one stopped, and yellow 2 is moving clockwise, thus drawing back the jammer. Again, yellow 2 is having a lot more impact in that case. Sometimes you'll have a case, where, particularly if you have a split pack situation over here. Oops. There's no pack right now, because now we have 2 equally valid packs. And you might have one continuing to block somebody else, and this one's running them back. And so you have to kind of like pick what's the more impactful at that point. You've got somebody who's continuing the blocking, but somebody who's running the jammer back. I'm not quite sure what takes priority in that case, to be honest. I'd probably go with the physical blocking on the track, and get that person off. But if somebody said it was pulling the jammer back was causing more impact, I'd accept that as well. Bottom line, as soon as basically one person, we issue the penalty, they don't even have to exit the track. Because having a penalty, that's like being down or out of bounds. They don't count anymore. So we no longer have 2 equally valid packs. And we can now reform the pack immediately in front and then issue the out of play to these 3. All right. No pack goes up. Remember, it's the rear IPR typically doing that, but it could be front, sometimes on rare occasions in OPR. If possible, we now issue the destruction penalty. Maybe it was Purple 1 who raced forward or something. Mind you, you're not always going to have time, because sometimes these skaters are going to be right there and just like one step and just reforms the pack. But assuming we've got some time, get that destruction penalty. Get that person identified, off the track, and everybody knowing how to react. All right. At this point, the front NPR starts issuing failure to reform penalties for any skaters that are continuing, to stride forward. So let's say Pivot does. So they issue a failure to reform penalty. Rear IPR will issue a penalty on somebody who's not making an effort to reform. Say this person, get them off. Then we go into sustained territory. This group is continuing to accelerate. That person goes off the track. This one now is actively, they're actually stopped, or at least they're braking fast. And that's fine, and they get up there. If they didn't, if we have to go into secondary ones, the referee might say, okay, well, they're both braking, that's fine, but this group, one is stopped with 2 and 3, then they issue a second penalty and get one off the track. And then these 2 get up here and reform the pack. OPRs, in the meantime, should be watching for any blocking that's occurring, because sometimes these no-pack situations can get very kind of long and crazy. You can get, things like this over here, where there's no valid pack, but it's a lot for a single referee to sort of take in their vision over here. It's just a very wide thing going on right now, and it's difficult to see. So, or maybe we've even got something like this. I'll even move one of these into the back here. There we go. So we got a no pack situation right now, but it's all that the referees can do to kind of keep track of just the pack formation. This is a really yucky situation. So if yellow 3 was to block and knock the pivot down, then we need to get the out of play penalty on yellow 3, because that way then we can reform the pack in the back, and it can take a team effort in cases like this. So either way, we want to continue issuing those penalties, like issuing the failure to reform to the front and rear group until the packs have reformed. If possible, keep repeating no pack in there, and so you're basically like, no pack. Blue 1-2 failure to reform. Yellow 3-7 failure to reform. No pack. Blue this, that, yellow this. No pack. Because you're repeating the no pack just so the skaters know I still expect them to reform. I have had a case in a game where I had a line of it was like a very rookie game, and the one veteran skater was in the box, and there's a no pack situation, and the rear group just stands there. There's a little jammer behind it, and they're confused. So I'm like, no pack. Yellow 3, failure to reform. So yellow 3 was, okay, they start going to the box, and they stand there. Yellow 2 failure to reform, and yellow 1 looks at me with terror in her eyes and goes, ah! And she just starts skating forward because she's confused. She doesn't know what I expect of her, and that's her problem and the team's problem, not mine if they haven't taught her the rules. So she just darts forward hoping to do something, and that's what I wanted. I had to goad them into a penalty by giving out 2 of these, and sending this poor terrified skater headed forward. But it got it to work. And I know there have been people that have been in situations where they've had to issue 3 penalties, 1, 2, 3 before the one finally starts moving forward. So if necessary, we do that. Just if you can, keep repeating the no pack. Yellow 1 failure to reform. No pack. Yellow 2 failure to reform. Keep repeating that process until the pack reforms. I want to give just one minor little reminder here. The difference between a failure to reform and an out-of-play block. It is very easy to get them confused. Out-of-play blocks involve high impact. They are a type of illegal contact penalty. So right now, even though we're in a no-pack situation, if yellow 2 blocks and knocks down, let's say knocks the jammer out, that's an out-of-play block. That's not a failure to reform. So if I'd had these 2 skaters moving forward, yellow 2 engages and blocks the jammer out of bounds, while yellow pivot just stands there. 2 penalties can be issued, not 1. Yellow 2 takes the out-of-play block, because they blocked with high impact during that, and yellow pivot takes the failure to reform, because they were not moving up to reform the pack. If you get them confused, then you might say, oh, well, yellow 2 initiated a new block, so I'm just going to issue the failure to reform. And meanwhile, these 2 are continuing forward, and they reform the pack, and the pivot got away with it because you thought this was a failure to reform, and you basically gave this one a little leeway because we issue the failure to reforms 1 at a time. An out-of-play block, think of it as sort of a bonus penalty during this process. It does not waive anybody from a failure to reform. So if this person is doing the out-of-play block and this one is failing to reform, boom, that's 2 penalties. It's 2 separate actions occurring at the same time. So it can be difficult to, as a referee, to process this all mentally fast enough and get it out. But if you can do it, great. That's also, by the way, why we like to say the OPRs can really help with those out-of-play blocks. Because that way the OPR can tweet, get that out-of-play block called, while the IPR focuses on that pivot who is failing to reform. And then those 2 go off, to the penalty box, and the pack reforms over here, and the game continues. Anyway, this is all very complex. If you're a new referee, I do not expect you to fully understand this. I do not expect you to be able to walk in now and IPR a game. It is very confusing. What I expect you to be able to do is have a vague idea at what I was talking about. So if you go watch an IPR now, you're going to go, oh, okay, yeah, I see what the IPR is doing. They're defining the pack. They're issuing the failure to reforms. Okay, that one's doing it out of play. That's failure to return. Okay, that one is to destruction. Okay, I kind of know what this stuff is. I can't do it myself yet, but I recognize the ingredients of what are going on. And as you begin to practice doing IPR work, then you're going to be like, whoa, like this is like blowing my mind. It's all I can do to even see where the pack is. Come back and watch this video again, because it will help. It will basically serve as a little refresher on some of the stuff going on, and it will help increase your understanding. And then when you IPR, for a few scrimmages now, okay, now you're beginning to get the hang of it, come back and watch this video again, because now you're going to be better at it. So anyway, let's go watch it. Let's go watch some video footage, and let's see what we can learn from that. All right, we've been talking about failure to reform, and now let's take a look at some videos here. Yep, there it goes. All right, let's see what we got here, folks.
No pack! Pack is here!
All right. We've got the game. Obviously, they're playing. They're moving forward. Then we get a no pack situation, so you hear no pack.
No pack! Pack is here!
Now, it didn't take very long for the pack to reform. As you can see here, we've got, no pack. We can't see the exact second. It's about right, like right here. So notice what's happening with that one blocker. She's breaking off, and she's coming back to bridge, and she basically reforms it. So it's kind of like no pack. Pack is here. There's really not much of a break. If you look at the rear group, you notice they're not really moving at all in this. The farthest skater does realize, and she kind of like scoots forward a step, but by then the pack is kind of reformed anyway. This is something where I would issue a no call. With the caveat, by the way, on all of these that I'm going to show you here, is that failure to reform is one of the areas that's hardest for referees to keep consistency between their impact spectrums. What some referees will allow, others will not. Some are stricter, some are looser. It's very difficult to try to bring this together. This is probably the most difficult area of the game to kind of unify all the different impact spectrums. But in this particular case, I'd consider this legal play. I'd say that the pack reformed fast enough, it's not worth issuing a penalty.
No pack! Pack is here!
It's worth mentioning, too, that I would not issue a destruction penalty on this over here. We've got, obviously, they're going forward. Red blocker could continue, but red blocker has broken off, stopped, but not so abruptly that blue blockers could not have done so as well. Blue blockers just kind of keep going up there, their blocks continuing. It's just sort of a natural destruction. And, of course, eventually...
No pack! Pack is here!
There we go. And there's a brief little no pack situation. I'm not too thrilled the fact that the rear group didn't reform, but in effect, that front person kind of came back and, reformed the pack there. Now let's take a look at a slightly longer pause here. Okay, why isn't this loading? There we go. Okay, this is absolutely blasting my ear. All right, turn this down a little. There we go.
No pack! Pack is here!
All right, a little bit longer that time. I'm not like running a stopwatch, but I'd guess the first one was maybe about a second or slightly more. This one now we're getting like a second and a half, second and 3/4, maybe 2. I'm somewhere. Not exactly certain. Notice what happens here. Pack moves up. Again, there's no real destruction penalty that I'm issuing here. Running up there. But the fact that this the far red one, by the way, was kind of far enough back. Again, blue time has some time to react and is choosing not to. So, it's just basically a natural pack destruction. But,
no pack! Pack is here!
Now, again, we've got a similar situation to the last one, where most of the rear group did not really do anything to reform, but we do have one skater that as soon as she earns a no pack, she darts forward. You can kind of see it. You see, there she goes. She's kind of darting forward to reform it. But really, by that point anyway, that front red blocker had had gone clockwise to reform it. So let this be a lesson to you right here, by the way, that even though the rear group is supposed to be moving forward, sometimes they can be saved from the penalty because someone in the front group moved clockwise for them. Front group didn't have to. Stopping was sufficient. But obviously in this case, front group wanted to keep its blockers, blocking there. And so they thought the bridge was worth, like getting that bridge in placked really fast was worth the, not the chance of getting a penalty on somebody in the rear group. So again, I want you to listen to this little pause here.
No pack! Pack is here!
Because, again, we've got skaters. No one's really going at high speed. They're all kind of stopped over there. Matter of fact, that red one's kind of going clockwise slowly. Like it's like they could reform it fairly quickly. I concede now, in this one, some referees would call that rearmost skater, the one with the gray helmet we're seeing there, they would call her for failure to reform. They would say that this was enough of a no-pack situation and it had impact on the game. And I would not say that is wrong. I would just simply point out that other referees with somewhat of a looser spectrum would not have issued it in this case. Because again, as I said, failure to reform is an area where it's hard to sync everybody's metrics up for a penalty. So this one, I would say, is falling more into a gray area. Oh, whether I would issue a penalty not on that one, by the way, it would probably depend, because in a game, a lot of what you want is consistency. So if you have one IPR who's being very strict and the other one who's being very loose, that's not ideal. So whether I'm going to take that one and round it up to a penalty or down to a no call may depend on what I see the other IPR doing and how strict or how loose they're being. Just because skaters can adapt. They're okay generally, if they have a looser game or a stricter game, but they just want that consistency so they can feel out where the referees are, so they know what they can do and what they can get away with and what they can't. When they're not getting consistency, that becomes very frustrating to them. So in a case like that, I don't know, it'd kind of be how the game was basically playing, and what I see in the other IPR. I'm not really certain, to be honest, whether I would issue the penalty or not.
Pack is here. No pack. Black 1-8. Failure to reform. Pack is here.
All right. In this case, I did issue a penalty because this is my helmet cam, so you're hearing me here. All right.
Pack is here.
We've got a pack in
no
front.
Pack.
So let's take a look and let's see why I'm issuing it on that back person, okay? We've got the no pack. Where do I issue that? There, here. I have the no pack. I want to start going slow exactly at that moment.
No pack!
There we go. Okay, so I got the no pack. Basically, as soon as that front skater kind of goes off. And by the way, I can't really see exactly what's going in the front. There might have been a destroying the pack penalty or something warranted there. I'm not, for the purpose of this discussion, I'm not going to worry about that. So the no pack goes up. Now, at this point, the rear group must immediately start moving forward. So what happens? The front one is not moving forward. She's going clockwise. The next ones are kind of like stopped. Okay, well, one of them now has started moving on the outside. And she's started moving up, and two of them are also just standing there. So basically, you've got, somebody who's moving in the wrong direction, two that are standing there, and one that's actively trying to reform. I have three good candidates to hand a failure to reform penalty to. So I'm going to issue it to the one that is most responsible or causing the most impact. And in this case, that's the one that's dragging this skater clockwise. So there she is in back, and I turn and I issue the penalty.
Black 1-8, failure to reform.
Now by this point, if you notice, these two have now managed to move up. I think maybe the pack had been just out of sight or something. Anyway, they've moved up a little bit, and so yeah, those two managed to escape the penalty. If they had not, and for some reason that, because we got the foremost, the one that's moving forward to reform. Suppose she's not able to reform for some reason. I don't know, maybe she gets a penalty or something, but let's say she's not able to reform. I issue a penalty to the person in back. I turn back, and there are those other two, there they are, still standing right there at that point. Then I would issue one of them a failure to reform penalty. But since I issued it and then they did reform, I'm okay with this. One penalty, and I think that worked out. All right, what are we looking at here?
No pack! Pack is here!
All right. Is a penalty warranted in this case? Obviously, that was a bit long of a no pack.
No pack! Pack is here!
That's a good 2 seconds in there. There was definitely impact. And that rear group, not doing a heck of a lot to reform, okay? So we've got this. We got, the no pack goes up because look at that front group. They're more than 10 feet away because we got that nice 10-foot marker right in there. And we can see that group is more. So the no pack situation goes up. Now, the foremost blocker here, foremost red blocker, I'm going to say red, I don't know, maybe it's pink. They ought to be able to move up. they're standing there. They're, just a quick, and then just taking, a step or two forward gives them that initial failure, initial attempt to reform that I want to see. But they didn't. Instead, and matter of fact, the next two are also standing there. Instead, I've got everybody totally concerned on getting that block in there. And I've got a bunch of skaters going in. In this case, I'm thinking that blocker in front over there, since I got 3 of them going in, she was really in front. Her block seems to kind of do the most. It's a little hard to tell from out here. So I'm going to issue her a penalty at this point.
The back! Pack!
And again, maybe with my resolution, if I was seeing this in a game, I would have identified, maybe one of those rear two, maybe the one with the orange helmet, actually their block had done a little bit more impact or something. It's a little hard to tell. Really, it could go either way. It's whichever one of those 3 blockers over there that were trying to block that jammer that you thought their block had the most impact, then issue the penalty. If you're not certain, give it to the foremost, since they were the nearest to the other group, and at that point, all things being equal, that one is going to be the most responsible for reforming. So, yeah.
The back! Pack is here!
Yep. And the only one that really seemed to actually make much of an attempt to reform was the one that's not blocking. She instead skated forward. Like that. And eventually the pack did reform about when she got to about here. So, but yeah, those are the 3 blockers. All 3 of them were failing to reform. One of them gets a penalty. Now, we've got a dual destruction and failure to reform penalty action.
Second half.
Now, notice how few skaters are on the in here. We got a whole slew in the box. We have 1 green pivot, 2 black blockers. That's all we got, and we got the 2 jammers.
Second half.
And with that whistle, our second half is off. Your California Kings.
No pack! Black 9-3, failure to reform. Green 9-9, remain on the track. Destroying the pack, remain on the track. All right, green 9-9, now you report to the box.
Hey, you'll find that happens a lot of the time. You're like, remain on the track? Okay, well, now you can go to the box, Skaters just love that. They're like, well, you make up your mind. But, it just happens that someone came back at that point. Okay. So, again, let's take a look what happens. We got jam start. Everybody's in a perfectly good position. Perfect. Okay, everything's fine so far. Jam starts. Nobody's really taken off at jam starts. Here comes the jammer. Black jammer starts to get through. And pivot decides they're going to go after him. Remember, this pivot is holding the pack together. They have a responsibility to hold that pack together. Now, they can initiate blocks, but only if they're not destroying the pack doing it. Once they, if they were able to initiate a good block within that 10 feet and that took them out of bounds, that's fine. That's legal gameplay. But look what they're doing. They're racing forward, and they just destroyed the pack just to try to keep a superior position, and maybe initiate a block. That's not sufficient. I want to see them staying within this 10 feet. Basically, they're tethered. They're chained to these 2. So now another thing. Notice the order in which I issued the penalties on this.
Second half is off. Your California Kings.
No pack! Black 9-3, failure to reform. Green 9-9, remain on the track. Destroying the pack.
All right. Few things here. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So she destroys the pack up there. Now, the first thing I do, I issue the no pack, warning. But now I need to see what's going on here, because I can't send her off the track anyway, and I know this. And the rear group, I need to get moving up, because, whereas normally I said, well, okay, the rear group needs to be moving up so they can reform the pack. That person's going to be stuck on the track anyway for a while. And I got a front IPR up there that can look and make sure that she's not continuing her block at this point. So I'm looking back, and what I see is black blocker.
No pack! Black 9.
Black 9-3, the close blocker right there, just stood there. I yelled no pack, and she didn't move. This is really loud in my ear.
Second half is off. Your California Kings.
No pack!
I yell no pack, and she stood there. She's attempting to bridge, not realizing, of course, that her other person has run off. So her bridge actually isn't doing any good. But yeah, so
Black 9-3, failure to reform.
So I issued the failure to reform. Notice I'm issuing that before the destroying the pack penalty, because A, I got to keep her on the track anyway, like that. And B, because she's not reforming and I'm issuing her a penalty, it's now all up to the other blocker to keep going. So I need that other blocker to know you're the only blocker on the track now, which is why I issue the penalty to black 9-3. Then I turn my attention back to her, the green pivot up there, and I issue the destroying the pack penalty, warning her to remain on the track. It's like we got dual penalties on here.
Second half.
And with that whistle, our second half is off. Your California Kings.
No pack! Black 9-3, failure to reform. Green 9-9, remain on the track.
Yeah, basically, I want to see black 9-3. Again, there's that initial reform. I want to see her at least take a step. Show me you're making a token effort, and she didn't. She just stood there. She's totally focused on her own blocker, wants to see what's going on. Now, something I want to keep in mind is why didn't I issue the penalty instead to the other black blocker who was skating her backwards? Because could that be viewed as having more of an impact? Let's watch. Watch real close.
No pack!
Go, she's pulling her back. Basically, I'm yelling no pack about right here. So she's already moving clockwise to pull her back. So as soon as I do, I turn my head, and notice she's already turned back. So she only really took a step or two because she heard that no pack and she flipped around. Had she continued going clockwise, trying to drag her back even farther, then she would have had priority over the closer black blocker. So yeah, in the end, 2 penalties. And, now they're starting to come back from the box. Yeah, actually, because she comes from the back from the box, and I send the pivot off, and I've still got 2 blockers on the track at that point. So, yeah, that's the way it works sometimes in the game. Now, here's a clip with 2 failure to reform penalties, one of which is going to occur significantly before the other. So let's watch this clip in kind of halves.
Pack is front, out of play in the back! Black 0-0, failure to reform!
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about this, because this is a little unusual. I didn't yell no pack, if you noticed. Let's see what I yelled. I yelled out of play, but...
Pack is front, out of play in the back!
See, I yelled out of play in the back, because initially, I figured there's a pack up front, but notice I've lost sight of it now. I'm looking back, and this is not a great place for me to be as an IPR here. I probably should have moved up with them, but they were kind of booking pretty good. But I should have moved up or alternately moved back and turned my head forward so I could see what's going on, because I've now looked back, totally unaware of what's going on in front. And let's take a look at what happened in front when I turn my head back. So we got 3 black blockers. I turn my head back, and look what happened. She's getting up. The other black blocker had fallen. Now, again, my peripheral vision is a little bit bigger than what my camera shows here. So it's also possible that the reason that I issued as a failure to reform instead of failure to return is because I realized there had the out-of-play situation had turned into a no-pack situation. Didn't really have time to get the warning out, because by the time I'm realizing it, they're imminently reforming anyway. So all I would have done is basically yelled, no pack, and then failure to reform on it. So again, let's take a look here.
Pack is front, out of play in the back!
See, I see her, and now...
Black 0-0, failure to reform!
Yep, so I might have very well been about to say failure to return, but then I noticed that blocker was down, and I thought, okay, let me just tweak it to failure to reform. It's also possible, because my camera doesn't pick up sounds of the other referees very well. It's like the microphone on this particular camera just isn't good for that. So I might have heard the referee next to me also saying, no pack, like that. So the no pack warning might have gone out, but it just didn't really come up on the microphone. By the way, why did I even issue the penalty at all? Well, look what she does.
Pack is front, out of play in the back!
I'm yelling out of play, and she's continuing the block. She needs to be ceasing that block, and she's not. She's actually continuing it.
Pack is front, out of play in the back!
Really more like initiating a new block. So, yeah, pivot there has earned herself a penalty. It's not going to go into sustained territory because the other blockers are all moving up. Everybody now is doing, at this instant, is doing exactly what they need to be, which is moving up. So there's no reason to issue a second penalty.
Pack is front, out of play in the back! Black!
Yep.
0-0, failure to reform!
So I got that right. Now let's continue on. Now, Jam's continuing.
No pack! Black 5-5, failure to reform!
Now, first off, if you listen to my little no pack, you hear my little voice warble, little no pack, like this. That's what happens when the head referee's voice starts to give. And you'll hear it a lot in tournament situations at the end when the person who's been IPR for most of the tournament, their voice is really giving them. So let me start by telling you what a THR told me one time. A THR came up to me and said, okay, I know your voice is going. I know you're having a tough time being heard, but I need you to give me that communication. I need to hear that sound. Destroy your voice. You're going to hurt. You're going to hate it, but get that sound out. The skaters need to hear it. Tomorrow, you can just shut up and say nothing all day at home, but for now, I need that sound. So consider that a funny voice over here, so or a funny little bit of advice. Anyway, let's take a look.
Arm.
All right, there's our no pack
No pack.
situation.
Black 5-5. Failure to reform. Pack is here.
All right. Why is there no destroying the pack? Well, that seemed to be kind of gradual. We do have that foremost blocker. See the blocker? She's stopping. But, you know, the other people all around, there's lots of stuff going on. It's not particularly, you know, it's not like nobody else could have reacted. You know, it's not... My program didn't like that. Wasn't too disrupted, and so I didn't worry about that. Yes, that is partially what led to it, but it wasn't like the other team had it, you know, like couldn't have bridged had they tried. So... But I'm more concerned what happens after the no pack. See, here's the no pack, right, at about this point, you know, because now they're more than about 10 feet away. And I glance up there, they're still going, because I'm trying to verify this is a no pack. So it's definitely, I mean, they're like 20 feet apart. So my no pack, I don't know at the instant I said that.
No pack.
Okay, so I got it about when she was on that red dot. So I'm probably getting that, probably about at 15 feet. So I'm running about 5 feet behind at this point, which is easy to happen because in the time it takes for you to mentally process it and then yell, no pack, that can be 5 feet right there if they're going fast. I think I was just a little slow on the call, so I should have been able to get a little faster. So I turn back, and what are they supposed to be doing? They're supposed to be moving up. And what are they doing? Oops. There we go. Let me go back a little bit. There we go.
No pack.
They take an initial step, but then they stop trying to reform. Remember what I said, an initial, give me a token. Give me just a signal you're trying to reform. And they do that. They move up a step. See, there she goes a little bit towards that red dot. And the others are moving up as well. They gave me that initial, but the pack has not reformed at that point. You know, I want them to reform. If that initial is not sufficient, now we're into a sustained no pack situation. Now the bar has gone up. It's no longer sufficient to take a single step or two. Now I want to see them actively continuing right in. And what did they do?
No pack.
She goes a little bit, but then she turns around.
Black 5-5.
And she's actually more focused on bracing her teammate and getting in the way of that pivot. I suppose the penalty could have gone to the one in back, but I was a little more annoyed at this point at the one in front over there because she could have reformed. But yeah, there's two of them really going in on it. Yeah, I didn't really view it as the rear blocker here, the rear black blocker. It doesn't really look like she's actively attempting to block. I think she kind of understands she's not supposed to, but that front blocker wants her to and is getting ready to brace her. And since the front blocker needed to reform, or was about to reform, had she kept going, it would have reformed. I gave her the penalty.
No pack. Black 5-5. Failure to reform. Pack.
Had it been more of a successful block from this rear blocker on the green pivot back there, then I would have issued the penalty to the rear blocker because her action would have been even having more impact on the jam. But she wasn't really doing too much to stop the purple blocker, or I'm sorry, the green pivot back there. So purple blocker, green pivot, it's all the same thing. It's all Lucky Charms and roller derby. So anyway, that concludes the footage I have. There we go. The footage I have for today. So, and indeed, it concludes this lesson in general. What do I have for you next time? I have, assists over there, which I would love to show you footage on, but I got like nothing. Assists are just not very common, and illegal assists are very rare, or very uncommon penalty. So we're going to talk about this more in theory. Anyway. So that concludes today's lesson. What do I have for you next time? I have assists. So both legal and illegal. And we'll be talking about that in lesson 26. Otherwise, for now, thanks for tuning in.